Grief is a heavy, confusing cloak. When my father, Richard, passed away suddenly 3 months ago, my entire world tilted. He was the anchor of our family, a loving husband to my mother, a steady pillar in our community, and a successful, if quiet, small business owner. His death, a completely unexpected heart attack, left my mother, Evelyn, and me reeling. Our family was small and close-knit, defined by one profound tragedy that happened before I was born: the death of my older brother, also named Richard, who died in infancy 20 years before I was born. My mother rarely spoke of him, saying the pain was too much. My father had kept one photo on his desk, a faded picture of a tiny grave-faced baby. It was a silent testament to the grief that shaped my parents' long marriage. 3 weeks after the funeral, the logistics began. My mother, utterly lost without her husband, asked me to handle my father's estate. Richard had been meticulously organized, so I assumed it would be straightforward. I started with his home office. It was a shrine to order, labeled files, color-coded receipts, and tax returns going back decades. I was looking for his birth certificate and Social Security card, the core documents needed for the probate attorney. I found the expected fireproof safe tucked under his desk. I knew the combination, our childhood phone number. I opened it, anticipating finding the crisp official documents. Instead, the safe was almost empty, containing only 2 items: a thick packet of cash, about $15,000 in worn bills, and a single thin manila envelope. The envelope was not labeled with his name. It was labeled R.S., Destroy After Death. I opened the envelope, my hands cold with foreboding. It contained not his original birth certificate, but a crudely folded, yellowed piece of paper that looked like an official letter. The letter was dated 35 years ago. It wasn't a letter to my father. It was a note from him, addressed to an unknown person, but the content was chillingly clear. The documents are secured. The name change is complete. I am officially Richard Sterling. The old life is gone. Tell no one. If this ever surfaces, it will destroy the family I am trying to build. I swear I will protect the real Richard Sterling's name and legacy until my death. I stared at the name he had sworn to protect. Richard Sterling. The name of my deceased brother. The horrifying realization slammed into me. The man I called Dad was not named Richard Sterling. He had stolen the name and the identity of the baby brother who had died 20 years before I was born. My father was not who he claimed to be. My entire life, our name, our history, our legacy, was based on a stolen identity. But who was he? And why did he choose the name of his dead son? I frantically searched the safe again, looking for the original documents, the real birth certificate, the real Social Security card. They were nowhere. He had been so meticulous about hiding the truth that he had destroyed his original self entirely. I found a small, locked metal tin tucked beneath a stack of old accounting journals outside the safe. This lock was more complex. I eventually managed to pry it open with a letter opener. Inside, I found the missing documents, not Richard Sterling's, but someone else's: a Social Security card, a birth certificate, and an ancient, faded passport photo. The name on the documents was Enrique Sanchez, born in a small village in Guatemala. Date of birth, 5 years before Richard Sterling's official birth date. The man I knew as my father, a successful American citizen, was actually Enrique Sanchez, an undocumented immigrant, 5 years older than he claimed, who had assumed the identity of my deceased brother. I looked at the photograph of the baby on my father's desk. the photo of the real Richard Sterling. My father hadn't kept the photo as a memorial to a lost child. He had kept it as a reminder of the life he stole and the legacy he was sworn to protect. The shame and betrayal were overwhelming. I was the daughter of a ghost, a criminal who had lived a decades-long lie. I had to tell my mother. Evelyn was fragile, and this truth could shatter her. I walked into the kitchen, where she was slowly drinking a cup of tea, lost in her grief. "Mom," I said, placing the documents and the crumpled note on the table, "we need to talk about Dad." He wasn't Richard Sterling. Evelyn didn't even look at the papers. She slowly placed her teacup down, her eyes distant. "I know, Clara," she whispered, her voice tired and flat. "I've known for 40 years. I helped him." "I know, Clara. I've known for 40 years. I helped him." My mother's calm admission was a second, quieter detonation. She hadn't just been deceived. She was an accomplice. The quiet grief she carried for my brother, the constant sorrow that had defined her for decades, was not for a single loss, but for a lifetime of calculated fraud. "You knew," I choked out, sinking into the chair opposite her. "You knew he was Enrique Sanchez, an undocumented immigrant, and you helped him steal the identity of your deceased son?" Evelyn closed her eyes, and the memories poured out, raw and painful, a truth she had carried in silence for 40 years. "Your father, Enrique, was working in the orchards outside of town when I met him. I was 20 and he was 25, but he said he was 20. He was desperate. He was undocumented, terrified of deportation, and completely alone. He was brilliant, kind, and hard-working, but he had no papers, no future." She paused, looking at the crumpled note I had retrieved from the safe. "We fell in love, but we couldn't get married. I couldn't risk his life, and he couldn't live hiding forever." Then came the original profound tragedy, the one that created the opportunity for the deception. My first son, the real Richard Sterling, died of SIDS when he was 6 months old. It was December 1985. The death certificate was issued. I was devastated. I was alone in my grief, consumed by it. A few months later, Enrique came to me. He was distraught. His work crew had been raided by INS, Immigration and Naturalization Service. He had barely escaped. He was terrified he was going to be deported back to a life he'd risked everything to leave. "And that's when you thought of it," I whispered, horrified. Evelyn nodded slowly, her gaze distant. The real Richard Sterling was dead. He would never need his papers. Enrique looked vaguely similar to the passport photo on Richard's first infant passport, a requirement for some legal travel we had planned. His complexion was similar. His height was close. He was 5 years older, but that was easy to hide. "It was my idea," she confessed, her voice thick with self-loathing. "I used my insurance payout from the death and the money I inherited to hire a fixer, a shady lawyer who specialized in creating new histories. We destroyed Enrique Sanchez's papers and used Richard Sterling's birth certificate and social security number. We created a new ID, a new life, a new birth date. Why the death cash? Because it was clean money, untraceable to Enrique. It was the price of his new identity. I did it because I couldn't bear to lose him. I lost one great love. I wasn't going to lose the second because of a bureaucratic accident of birth. I convinced myself I was saving a man, not committing a crime. The love story was agonizingly twisted. A woman so consumed by grief and love that she committed a federal crime to secure her partner, erasing her own dead son's memory in the process. For 40 years, we lived in fear, Evelyn continued. Every time there was a knock on the door, every time he had to sign a mortgage document, every time he filed taxes, it was a high-wire act. We never traveled abroad. We never risked anything that would require deep vetting. That's why he was always so private, so reserved. He was terrified of the audit. He was terrified of the lie unraveling. And the $15,000 in cash in the safe? I asked, pointing to the worn bills. That's his true safety net, emergency cash for a fast escape. He always kept that money separate in case the law ever caught up to him. It was meant to buy him a few days' head start. And what about me, Mom? Your daughter? Did you ever plan to tell me the truth? Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Never. You were the product of the perfect lie. You are Richard Sterling's daughter. You are a U.S. citizen with a clean legal history. We created a safe world for you. Telling you would have only made you an accomplice. We took the secret to the grave. Or so I thought. But why did he die without destroying the RS Destroy After Death note? He was so meticulous. Evelyn frowned, looking confused. He was supposed to destroy that note the day he retired. It contained the names of the few people who knew the truth. The lawyer, his best friend from the orchards, and my cousin. He was supposed to burn it as the final act of ending the lie. I can't believe he left it. Her confession was complete. The man I called Dad was a ghost, a loving thief who stole his identity from his dead son. I was the product of a crime. But one detail still bothered me. The note said he would protect the identity until his death. Why was the cash still in the safe? Why was the note still there? I looked at Evelyn, my heart aching for the trauma she endured. Mom, you need a lawyer now, a specialist. If the probate process uncovers this, you could face criminal charges. I know, Clara. I'm ready to face it. The guilt has been a physical weight for 40 years, but you can't be involved. You need to handle the estate now, quietly. And you need to find that lawyer he was talking about in the note, the fixer. I had the truth, but the legal and moral ramifications were just beginning. I was left to clean up a 40-year-old crime, a crime that now threatened to expose my mother. The knowledge that my mother was a co-conspirator in federal identity fraud was a devastating weight. My priority shifted instantly from mourning my father to protecting my mother. The probate process had begun, and if the court discovered the true identity of Richard Sterling, Evelyn would face a swift indictment. I immediately hired a formidable criminal defense attorney for my mother and a specialist in immigration law. The advice was unanimous. We had to stall probate, establish a defense for Evelyn based on coercion, the fear of losing the man she loved, and most importantly, prevent the exposure of Enrique Sanchez's true identity to the federal government. We were already in too deep to confess. The 40-year deception was now our new reality. I returned to my father's office, my new mission to find the fixer, the shady lawyer mentioned in the Destroy After Death note. I went through every single accounting journal and receipt book. I found what I was looking for, buried in a 1986 receipt for consulting fees. A small law firm name and address in a distant state. I called the firm, asking for the old lawyer. He was retired, but the current firm partner was highly experienced. I told him a very carefully curated version of the truth. My late father, Richard Sterling, hired your firm years ago for a complex personal matter involving an identity change. We now have an urgent issue with probate, and I need to know the terms of his original arrangement. The lawyer was cagey but admitted the firm handled sensitive, life-altering administrative matters for a client matching the description. He warned me, "Your father paid a substantial retainer 35 years ago to ensure his documentation remained flawless, but he also paid a separate annual retainer, a monitoring fee, to a third party. This third party was the final failsafe. If your father ever stopped the annual payment, that third party was responsible for initiating contact to prevent the identity from expiring." "A third party? Who?" I demanded. "That information is sealed, but I can tell you this. Your father was due to make his final, large annual payment 3 days after his death. Since the payment was missed, the failsafe was triggered. You need to prepare, Miss Sterling. Someone is going to contact you soon, and they will want the money." The lawyer hung up, leaving me with the chilling realization. My father hadn't just stolen an identity, he had paid a silent, secret watcher for 40 years to protect his lie. And now, the watcher was coming for the final payment. 2 days later, the anonymous call came. The number was blocked. The voice was deep, gravelly, and completely unfamiliar. "Clara Sterling? Who is this? I am the executor of your father's final arrangement. We have a debt that is past due. It's the final monitoring fee for the Richard Sterling identity. It's $50,000, and it's due immediately." $50,000. More than 3 times the emergency cash my father had kept in the safe. "What arrangement?" "My father is dead. The debt is void," I countered, trying to sound authoritative. The man chuckled, a cold, unpleasant sound. "No, Miss Sterling, the debt is not void. The arrangement was for life, plus a final payment to ensure the documents were permanently retired. If the payment isn't made within 48 hours, the documentation, including the original Enrique Sanchez identity and your father's admission of fraud, will be delivered to the FBI, the Social Security Administration, and the probate court handling the estate of Richard Sterling." The threat was immediate and total. It wasn't just about money. It was about ensuring my mother went to prison and my father's entire life was officially marked as a criminal fraud, potentially voiding his business contracts and leaving me penniless. "Where are those documents?" I demanded. "They are in a secure location." "But your mother knows. Ask her about the cousin's box." The phone line clicked dead. I raced back to my mother, who was sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the wall. "Mom, who is the cousin's box? And what is the $50,000 final payment?" Evelyn finally looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. "The box!" I told Enrique he had to have a backup, a final failsafe. If anything happened to me, his cousin Luis, who lives near the border, was the only person who knew the full story and had the original documents. Luis. Was he the one who provided the $15,000 in cash? The emergency money? "No," Evelyn whispered, her voice laced with the final truth. "That cash wasn't his emergency money. That was the initial installment for the final $50,000 payment. Enrique didn't trust the banks. He was saving it in cash for the final payoff. He died 3 days before he was supposed to complete the payment." The lie was even deeper than I thought. My father's death was not the end of his deception. It was the start of the final, desperate scramble to hide the truth. I had to find Luis in the box of original documents, but I was trapped. I had 48 hours to find a hidden document cache and come up with $35,000 in cash to pay a blackmailer, all to save my mother from prison. The inheritance I was supposed to receive was now the cost of a 40-year-old crime. I had 48 hours to find a man named Luis, retrieve a box containing evidence of federal identity fraud, and somehow raise $35,000 in cash to pay a blackmailer. The thought of paying a criminal felt morally repugnant, but the alternative, my mother going to prison, was unbearable. I contacted the lawyer who was handling Evelyn's criminal defense. He confirmed that paying the blackmailer was the only way to ensure the documents were destroyed and Evelyn remained free. It's extortion, Clara, but the risk of exposing the Enrique Sanchez identity is far too great. Pay the money, get the box, destroy the evidence. First, I had to find Luis. Evelyn gave me the name of the last known town near the border where Luis, a distant cousin of my father, lived, a place called El Desierto, hundreds of miles away. I knew I couldn't risk flying or taking my car. I arranged for a rapid, untraceable rental car and told Evelyn I was leaving immediately. "The cousin's box, Clara," Evelyn whispered, grabbing my hand. "It's the only real proof left. Enrique made a point of telling me that if I ever needed to find Luis, the key to his location was hidden in the real Richard Sterling's baby photo." I raced back to the office. I took the faded small photo of the baby boy, my deceased brother, the real Richard Sterling, from the desk. I carefully peeled back the backing, expecting a tiny note. Instead, I found a micro SD card taped securely to the cardboard. I plugged the SD card into my laptop. It contained a single encrypted file. It took me 30 agonizing minutes to guess the password. It wasn't the anniversary. It wasn't a birthday. It was the name of the small Guatemalan village where my father, Enrique Sanchez, was born. The file was a detailed, handwritten journal entry from my father, dated 1986. It detailed the entire deception, the death of the baby Richard, the creation of the stolen identity, and the network of people involved. The final page contained an address in El Desierto and a description of the drop-off location for the cousin's box. I printed the address and left. The drive was long and desolate, crossing 3 states. As I drove, I absorbed the terrifying reality. I was no longer a grieving daughter. I was cleaning up a crime scene spanning 4 decades. I reached El Desierto just as the 48-hour deadline was closing in. I found the address, a dusty, dilapidated storage facility. I introduced myself to the owner, asking for Luis's unit. The owner immediately looked wary. Luis hasn't paid his rent in a month, but a man left a package here for him 2 weeks ago, said it was essential for his final arrangements. I showed the man a copy of the journal entry, pleading that I was Luis's relative and needed the package. After a desperate negotiation and a large cash payment, the owner gave in. He led me to a small, unmarked storage unit. On a dusty shelf sat a single, plain wooden crate, the cousin's box. Inside the box, I found a collection of documents that confirmed every fear. Enrique Sanchez's original birth certificate, his original passport, and the most damning evidence, a handwritten, notarized confession from my father detailing the identity theft of Richard Sterling. The box also contained the full contact information of the blackmailer, the man who called me. He wasn't Luis. He was the blackmailer's associate. Luis was just the final custodian. I had the evidence. Now the money. I was short $35,000. I had already emptied my savings, but it wasn't enough. The only asset I could liquidate that fast was my wedding ring, the one piece of jewelry my Richard Sterling had given me. It felt like the final, necessary sacrifice. I found a pawn shop in the dusty town and sold the ring for enough cash to complete the $50,000 payment. The marriage was a lie built on a crime, and the ring was the final cost of that truth. I contacted the blackmailer's number. He directed me to a remote, abandoned roadside diner at 1 a.m. I arrived, terrified, clutching the money. The man who met me was tall, shadows hiding his face. I didn't exchange words. I pushed the cash across the trunk of his car. He counted it quickly, his fingers stained with grease. "The documents," I demanded. "Destroy them now." "Already done, Miss Sterling," he scoffed, pocketing the money. "We sent a confirmation code to your mother's address, a single-coded message. 'Rest in peace, Richard.' That means the paper trail stops here. Your father's secret is safe. We keep our word." He drove away, leaving me standing alone in the desolate darkness. A woman who had just paid a king's ransom to buy a lie. I drove back, exhausted but carrying the weight of the cousin's box, the original documents that had started the 40-year deception. I had saved my mother from prison, but the moral cost was profound. When I arrived home, my mother was waiting. She saw the box and the exhaustion on my face. "Did you get the code?" she asked, her voice hopeful. "Yes, the secret is safe, Mom, but I still have the original identity, the cousin's box. I need to know what to do with Enrique Sanchez's real life." Evelyn, finally breaking from her grief, looked at the box. "We honor the man I loved, Clara. We destroy the documents. But first, there's one more thing your father did. One final, terrifying truth you need to know about the man you knew as Richard Sterling." I was back in the cold sanctuary of the house, holding the cousin's box, the physical proof of my father's 40-year deception. I had paid $50,000, sold my wedding ring, and driven 3 states to buy a lie, all to save my mother from prison. "What is the final truth, Mom?" "What else could there possibly be?" I asked, my voice raw with exhaustion. Evelyn walked to the office desk where the remains of my father's life were still scattered. She reached behind a stack of books and pulled out a small, old, leather-bound journal, something I had never seen. "This is Enrique's journal from his first year in America," she whispered. "I kept it because I didn't want him to destroy his entire past. It holds the key to why he was so desperate to disappear." She opened the journal to a specific entry, dated days before the death of the real Richard Sterling. She pointed to a passage written in hurried Spanish, which she translated for me. "He wasn't just a poor immigrant trying to make a better life, Clara. He was a fugitive. He was running from his past." The journal entry detailed a chaotic political protest in his home village in Guatemala. Enrique, a passionate young man, had been involved. During the protest, a confrontation escalated into violence. A local police officer who was known for his corruption was killed. Enrique admitted in the journal that he was the one who fired the accidental fatal shot during the chaos. He had fled immediately, fearing not just deportation but extradition and an unjust murder conviction. He killed a man, Mom. Accidentally or not, he was running from a homicide charge. I stared at her, the blood draining from my face. Yes, he was a fugitive from justice. The identity theft wasn't just to secure a green card or a job, Clara. It was to escape a potential life sentence. He took the name of my dead son to bury a deadly past. That's why he was so meticulous. That's why the cousins box was necessary. That's why he never traveled. The lie wasn't just about love and grief. It was about survival. The Richard Sterling I knew was a criminal who had committed identity theft to conceal a murder, a crime he carried for 40 years. The man I mourned wasn't just a beloved father. He was a ghost who had committed a lifetime of fraud to escape a homicide charge. The $50,000, I realized, the puzzle pieces slamming into place. That wasn't just a fee to keep the secret quiet. That was a final payment to a criminal network to ensure his identity was permanently erased from the records in Central America, too. He was buying silence on 2 continents. Evelyn nodded slowly. He wanted to die as Richard Sterling. He didn't want the truth to hurt you. He didn't want the shame to follow you. I finally understood the full, terrifying weight of the truth I held. I looked at the cousins box, which contained the original birth certificate of Enrique Sanchez. This was the most dangerous piece of paper in the world. "What do we do with this, Mom?" I asked, pointing at the box. "We can't keep it." "We honor his last wish, Clara. We destroy the proof. We let Richard Sterling rest in peace, and we let Enrique Sanchez finally disappear." That night, under the cold, silent stars, we performed the final, solemn act of burying the past. We drove to the back acreage of our property. Using a metal trash can, we built a small, contained fire. One by one, we fed the flames the life of Enrique Sanchez, the original birth certificate, the old passport, the handwritten confession of identity theft, and finally, his journal detailing the fatal protest. As the papers curled, blackened, and turned to ash, the smoke carried the ghost of Enrique Sanchez away forever. The final price of the perfect lie was paid, $50,000, my wedding ring, and the total destruction of my father's memory. We drove back to the house, the silence between us heavy with shared guilt and newfound peace. Evelyn had found an uneasy closure, finally free of the 40-year-old secret. I was left with the house, the inheritance, and a name, Clara Sterling, that was the product of a crime. I had survived the financial threat, but the moral legacy would remain. My father was a fugitive, a murderer, an identity thief, and a loving father. He proved that sometimes the kindest, most responsible person you know is actually the most dangerous criminal, living a perfect decades-long lie, all built upon the tragic death of a baby brother. The real Richard Sterling was gone, and the lie had won. But the truth, known only to me and my mother, was the key to our future.